My name is Kevin Holman. I work for Microsoft, and what I'm going to talk about today is using fragments, XML fragments, to make management packs really easily with Select MP Author Pro. As was discussed earlier, I gave a session on using these fragments with Visual Studio at the last MPU, and since then, Select has done a lot of improvements to their MP Author Professional tool that consumes these same fragments and makes them much simpler to use, and so I want to show that to you guys today. Let's talk a little bit about the MP authoring tools of the past and what we use. So I looked at the poll results and I saw, the overwhelming majority of you guys, you write things in the SCOM console, right? That's the kind of the easiest tool. It's very wizard driven, and it covers probably 80% of common scenarios that you need to author. And then back in SCOM 2007, we introduced an advanced console called the 2007 Authoring Console, and that was a dedicated MP authoring platform. It was very powerful. It allowed you to make very complex workflows that were impossible to make using the SCOM console. It had a learning curve to it, but it still was primarily UI driven. I won't say wizard driven as much, but very UI driven in order to help you make complex data sources and probe actions, monitors and monitor types without necessarily having to go down at the XML level directly. For the people that have been around a while, we had a Visio authoring tool that we very quickly put on the shelf, and it was a cool idea. It just had a lot of limitations, and we've stopped any support for that. I don't know anyone using that today. And then obviously XML editor directly, whether you're using Visual Studio Code or Notepad++ or another XML editor, or maybe just Notepad. Some customers still use that, and I admit I still use XML editors quite a bit when I'm moving things around inside of a management pack. Then we have Visual Studio authoring extensions. That came out with SCOM 2012, and it basically is a plugin to Visual Studio. For people that were developers, they gravitated towards this immediately. They were already used to using Visual Studio. For people who are not developers and not really deep into management packs, they pretty much avoided it, and myself included in that bucket initially, because it seemed very daunting. It was not wizard driven. You really had to know and learn how VSAE wanted to create new modules, and there was a lot of copy and paste. There wasn't a whole lot of examples out there. And then Select, of course, launched their MP Author, which is the MP Author is the free version. Then they have more advanced versions with Professional and Studio, which is much more wizard-driven. It's very easy to use. It's more of the IT pros authoring tool, and the primary focus of my session is going to be showing MP Author Pro and some of those features as it regards to fragments. So let's talk about what is a fragment. So almost half of you don't know what a fragment is or don't have exposure to that. So a fragment is simply a piece of XML. It's its own format. It's an MPX file, a .mpx file, that just contains pieces or the working parts of a workflow. Now, when I say a workflow, I mean a rule or a monitor or a discovery or group. These are the things that you work with all the time when you go to create something. Someone says, hey, I need something in SCOM that monitors for this condition or that condition. You're going to go create a rule or a monitor. But a monitor, I'll just use that as an example, that can have a lot of working parts. A monitor leverages a monitor type behind the scenes. A monitor type might leverage a data source. A data source might call a bunch of probe action scripts. So there's kind of this, if you get down to the XML level, it's a lot of stuff. And so if you want to create something that's complex today, like a script-based monitor, I would call that a fairly complex solution. The SCOM UI doesn't allow you to create PowerShell script-based monitors in the UI. And in order to go author that, without a tool that makes it easy, it's really hard to do. And fragments allow us to suck examples in that were provided by the community and just make minor changes to the fragment and create very complex workflows. The other thing they allow us to do is they allow us to use them over and over again. So one of the things customers wanted, many times they would request, hey, I need to create 50 rules, and doing that in the console is so slow because I have to go through this wizard over and over again. And so using fragments, you can just suck in the same fragment over and over and just make these minor changes, and I'll demonstrate some of that today. And so once you have something that's complicated, like a script-based monitor or a really complex discovery, you can turn that into a fragment, and then you can use it over and over again. It makes it really easy. So you don't have to remember, how did I build this, or how did I write this complex, solution. A lot of times I'll write management packs, and then, 6 months later, I can't remember. And I go back and look at my own work, and I'm surprised that I even wrote it. So fragments take that problem away, because we can just go look for a community solution that's already provided, make minor changes to customize it for what we need, and then suck it into MP Author and just use it over and over again. So the places, where can we use fragments? So the Visual Studio authoring extensions is what brought fragments to the forefront. So this has been available in Visual Studio ever since we launched in 2012. It just never took off. And the reason fragments didn't take off, I believe, is because while a lot of people talked about them and talked about the value and how they make things easy, the challenge was nobody provided a library. Nobody provided a bunch of really good examples that actually worked, that were easy to use, and demonstrated how to use them. And so that's what I think we're all trying to change, to make these more adoptable and much simpler. So let me give you an example of what a fragment actually looks like. So I've created a library. These are what you see here on my screen. These are all fragments. And I've created a library of very common fragment types that we would use on a regular basis. So I'm going to pick something very simple, just a rule that generates alerts from an event log, and open that up. And what you see here is there's a comment section at the top. I'm going to go ahead and collapse that. And then you see the normal things you would look at in XML. This XML contains basically a rule that has a presentation section and the language pack section, which is the section that describes, in English what, in what the display names of the workflows are. But this is a very simple XML fragment. It just contains a rule that has the data source for the event ID and then the right action that generates an alert. And so the concept here is that we can come up with this library of fragments that has very simple things that we just need to find and replace throughout the XML. So these would be the common things you would be asked to provide in a wizard-based solution like the SCOM console. So the SCOM console would ask you, what target do you want to target the workflow to? What event ID, what event source, what event log? These are the things you would be asked in a wizard, and they can actually be filled in much, much faster than any UI can provide. So let's look at an example of Visual Studio using a fragment. So this would be, for people that like to use Visual Studio, these fragments work in either MP Author Pro or Visual Studio. So you can use the same fragments in either platform. So I'm going to just create a new, whoops, that's the wrong one, a new project. And I'm going to create a management pack for 2012, and we'll just call this demo. and it's creating my management pack solution behind the scenes. It's adding the references. And so the first thing I can do in my empty management pack, I can add an existing item. And I'm going to go into my fragments, and I'm just going to pick like a registry key discovery. So this is, I want to discover instances of an application that's deployed in my environment. So I'm going to choose this one for an example, and the reason I'm choosing this is because we're going to go back and do the same thing in MP Author Pro, and you can kind of see the differences and how much easier it is. So I'm going to choose the class and discovery registry key in Visual Studio, and I can see in the comment section I have 3 things that I need to provide to this, and so they'll always be at the top of my fragments. This is kind of a standard I came up with. It's not hard and fixed, and then I provide information about if there's formatting that you need to know about. You know, what does the fragment do, and then if there's special formatting for any of the objects within the fragment that you need to replace, you know, what it should look like, right? So here's an example of what we have to do in Visual Studio. I would just do a find for this tag, and I'm going to provide the company ID. Now my company ID is Fabricam, so I'm just going to call this Fab, and I'm going to replace anything in this XML with Fab. So my app name is going to be print app. So let's say this is just a made-up application that I'm providing, and then the reg key path. So this is where do I look for the existence of this application. So I can provide just a registry key like the existence of a service. So for instance, let's say I want to use the spooler service. So I can just use that registry key path here, and I'm done. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to use. It's fairly fast. At this point, I can save it and build it, and it creates that as a management pack in Visual Studio. And all I had to do was find and replace. I don't need to understand the XML. I don't need to know, you know, what all of this stuff does. I know that I need to discover a class based on the existence of a registry key. That's why I chose this fragment. So, so that's Visual Studio and how it works. And then I would just start sucking in more and more fragments based on what I want to do. Okay, and so let's talk about building out a management pack with MP Author Pro. So let's say that my fictitious company Fabricam, people come to me, I'm the monitoring guy, and they say, hey, we've got this line of business app that's really critical. It's out on servers in the field, and it does some business critical function, and we need to make sure that we're monitoring it appropriately. And so there's no third-party management pack or Microsoft management pack for that app, so you need to create one. So what a lot of people do is they'll just go create some monitors and rules and just target something general like Windows Computer or Windows operating system, and they'll disable it and enable it just for that system. That's not very dynamic. That's a very resource-intensive process. It causes a lot of trouble down the road. I like to call it spaghetti. You know, it just creates a big mess over time that will eventually have to be cleaned up. The right way to do it is to write a discovery for that application. And so once we can discover it, then we can very finitely target the monitoring towards it. It'll enhance our views. It'll enhance our notifications. It'll just make the whole process a lot cleaner. And that's the way Microsoft and third-party management packs already work. So the first step we want to do is discover the app. Then let's say that the app has a service that we want to monitor. There are processes spun up by that service that we want to monitor. Maybe we want to collect some data for performance, that this application spits out performance data in perfmon that's relevant. We maybe want to monitor thresholds for that performance data. There are events in the event log. So as you can see, these are the common things that you would typically do. So let's say that team wants to view the health of their application. So we can create views for them and let them see the health of the app in the console itself. And then we can also create groups. And we might be creating groups that contain an instance of this application for purposes of notification scoping or custom overrides. So there's all kinds of reasons for this, and I just want to show you how simple it is to create all of these. I can literally do everything on the screen in about 5 minutes using Fragments, and there's no other tool that you can do that with. All this this amount of rules and monitors and workflows, classes, discoveries, nothing else can do it that fast. So you'll really appreciate the speed, not just the ease, but also the speed that you can create this kind of stuff with. So with that, let's dive right into the tool. So I am going to launch MP Author. Oh, I think, yeah, I want to run that as an administrator. Okay, and so my first thing I'm going to do is create a new management pack, and this is the wizard based, and I need to give my management pack an ID, so I'm going to call this fab.print app, and I'll save it to my fab print app folder. That looks good. And so this screen, it's asking me what do you want to develop this pack for? Is this, Windows or network monitoring? And this basically is going to tell MP Author what set of initial references and what's the minimum version that it can be imported into. So I want to develop this for 2012 R2 and up, right? So it'll still work in 2016. And I'm going to choose an empty management pack here and finish. All right, and so now I have my management pack up. This is just an empty management pack at this point. I could save it, I could import it, but there's nothing in it. So the first thing I want to do, based on that slide, was I want to discover my application. So what you'll see here is they have added a really cool button called Import Fragment right here at the top. And so I can import this fragment, and it remembers the last one I did. So I just want to show you browsing, and I'm going to go pick a way to discover that that application. So what you can see is I've created quite a bit of class and discovery fragments. So I have like registry key exists. I can run a PowerShell script against the registry. I can look for a reg value existence, or I can do an expression where a registry value has to equal something or be greater or less than. I have scripts for PowerShell and VBScript. I have ones written for Unix and Linux systems, WMI queries. So all the common ways you would discover an application, that there's a fragment here for. And if one of these doesn't work, you always just can default to script-based, because with script-based discoveries you can do anything. So for the purpose of simplicity, I'm just going to look for register key exists. So I'll choose that. And what you'll see is it remembers the last values I gave when I ran MP Author. So we're going to ignore that and kind of start from scratch. So if you remember the XML that I showed you a minute ago, there were actually, you can see it right here below because they have an XML browser. These were the three things encapsulated in the pound signs that I need to provide. And so what MP Author does is it reads that section and it prompts you for what is required to be input, and it shows you the changes it's making. So for instance, my company name is Fab, and then I'm just going to tab, and what you'll see is when I put in Fab, it changed. It did that find and replace for me in the XML. So my app name is Print App, and if I tab to my next one, you'll see the same thing. It went and changed it in all the sections in the XML, and it highlights it for you as you click on things, so you can see where it's used within the XML. And then lastly was the reg key path. Now, when I did this in Visual Studio, I had to know my registry key path. I had to copy and paste it and make sure it was formatted properly, and read all these instructions. With MP Author Pro, I don't have to do that. I have a browse button. So this browser will allow me to browse the registry and I can browse my local machine's registry, or I can choose another machine on the network. So I can look in System, Current Control Set, Services, and then come over here and find my spooler service. And here it is, and I'm just going to use the print spooler as my service to discover this application on. Call it my print app, right? And as you can see, it automatically filled that in based on the browser and went down into the XML and filled that in as well in the necessary location. So again, you don't need to know anything about the XML. All this is just being populated based on a simple, 3 questions. What's your company ID? What's the app name? And what's the reg key path? So I'm going to choose import. And that just sucked that fragment into my XML. Now I went really slow so I could explain it all, and you could kind of see the step-by-step, but we could have done that in probably 30 seconds. So you can see, what did that actually create? Well, it created my print application class. If I look for discoveries, it also created the discovery to discover instances of that class. Now at this point, I could save my management pack, and right here from within the MP Author Pro, I can right-click and I can say, hey, let's deploy this, and give it the management server name and credentials, and it will automatically deploy this management pack. And here it says, okay, here's the management pack. Do you want to deploy it? And down here at the bottom, it gives you a status of what's going on with the import. And so it's letting me know, hey, that it's going, it's pushing it into the management group. And that will actually go out and immediately discover all the instances of anybody that has that spooler registry successfully deployed. There we go. So, so that's my class and discovery. But back in my list, I've got a whole bunch of stuff to do. So I've got service, process, reporting. So let's kick off with those. And we're going to get faster as we go through it, because you're going to see MP Author Pro is going to fill in a lot of this stuff for us. So in this case, I'm just going to hit Import Fragment, and I'm going to browse. And we need a service. So I'm going to choose Monitor Service with an alert. So I've got lots of different fragments for different scenarios for service monitoring. I'm just going to do a simple one, monitor a service with an alert. So I'm going to open that one, and these are the things that it's prompting me for. And what you'll notice is it remembers the last things that I used. So it automatically populated company ID with Fab and print app with my app name. And so all I really have to provide in this case is the class ID and the service name. So, and look, we've got browsers for both of those. So the class ID is going, I want to target this monitor to the application class that I just created. So I'm going to browse, and it's right there up front, my Fab print app class. So I'm going to choose that. And then for my service name, I have another browser. And this, I don't need to type in the service name. If I want to, I totally can type it in. But if I don't know exactly what it is, I can browse, and it will show me all the services that are on this system, or I can choose a remote network system. And so what I want is the print spooler. So here it is. And I'm going to click OK, and that will automatically put the short name in of the service. So what you'll see down below is it filled all this in, Fab, print app, spooler, service monitor. It set up the alerts for me. So it basically made it super simple. I didn't have to look at XML. I didn't have to go through a complicated UI. I just had to answer 2 questions. Who do you want to target this to, and what service do you want to monitor? So I'm going to choose import. And that now, if I look in my monitor section, I'll have my spooler service monitor. Right? And so one of the things that talking about like doing this multiple times, let's say that I had another service with my application. I can just choose import fragment. It leaves it on the last one I used, and I literally could change this and add my foo service monitor. I'm just making something up there, and import. Now, I just added a second monitor in about 3 seconds. No other tool can do that. There's no UI that you could get through that fast enough. So if you have a lot of repetitive things that you want to do, this is awesome. It's really, really fast. So let's continue on. So based on the next thing that I needed to monitor was a process. So let's go ahead and do that one. So I'm going to choose Import Fragment. And again, I'm going to browse for the fragment that I want to pick. And I have a monitor process in here. There we go. So I'm going to choose that and open it. And it automatically remembers what my company ID was, my app name, and what class I want to target. So I don't have to fill any of that in. I just have to go to process name, and again, Select has provided a browser, so I don't have to know the exe for my process. I can just simply browse a list. So I'm going to choose that, and in this case, I think it's spoolsv.exe. That's my print spooler process. So I'm going to choose that one from the list, and it automatically puts that in the XML. So what you can see is it did the find and replace. It automatically puts the necessary stuff throughout the management pack. So I'm going to choose import. And this is an interesting thing. It automatically knows, whoa, you need a process monitoring library reference in the XML. Now, if you were doing this in Visual Studio, you'd have to go find that management pack and add it as a reference manually and make sure you aligned everything. You don't have to do anything like that with the MP Author. It just says, hey, do you want me to add this automatically? And you just say, yes, thank you. And that's all there is to it. And so that put it in my management pack. So what you'll see is I now have a process monitor that's built into my management pack. Very fast. Process monitoring in SCOM is through a very complicated template that is super complex, and it makes you pick a group, and I just hate it. And this is so much easier to use, and it makes a much better monitoring experience for processes. So continuing on, we have reporting, collection, and monitor for performance. So let's do both of those. So I'm going to import fragment. I'm going to choose browse. And this time I want a rule that collects performance. So I have a fragment for that. Rule, performance, collection, perfmon. I tried to name them so they were somewhat explanatory. And now this one's a little more complicated. It's got a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm going to wipe this out. It just remembers things from previously. So it automatically populated my company ID, my app name, the class I want to target this to, but I need to provide the perf data, the object name, instance, counter, and frequency. Well, this is pretty cool. Select has browsers for these, so I can just browse perfmon, and it will put this data in. So I'm going to choose object name, and we're going to pick something from the print queue, since this is a print app. And the counter name, we're going to choose, let's do jobs and underscore total. So maybe I'm interested in the total number of print jobs that are occurring on this print application. Click OK, and it automatically put that in there for me. And then the last thing I have to provide is frequency. So I can use my browser again, and I can say, hey, I want to collect this every 5 minutes. So that's what it defaults to, but I can set this to whatever I want. Seconds, hours, days, So 5 minutes is pretty typical for perf collection, so we'll go ahead and go with that. And you can see it knows that this was actually an interval in seconds, so it translated 5 minutes to 300 seconds. And then below, it put all of that information in to the XML. So again, you don't need to understand this, but what's really cool is the more you use a tool like this, the more the XML will become demystified, and you'll understand what's happening behind the scenes a lot better, and it'll make you a better author. So I'm going to go ahead and import this, and once again, I have the same issue. I need another management pack reference, the data warehouse library, but they'll just automatically include that for me. I just hit yes and say thank you. And so if I look in the rules section, I now have a performance collection rule that is collecting the print queue jobs, right? So let's save this, and let's go ahead and do another one. I'm going to choose import fragment, and the other scenario is we want to monitor for the same performance counter. So I'm going to choose monitor and performance consecutive samples to states. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. So look at this. I don't have to provide anything. It automatically filled out my company ID, my print class that I want to target. It remembers the last perf data that I provided. Now, if I wanted to change this, I totally can use the browser. And then it automatically, it remembered a thresholded sample, so I might have to provide that. So I'll say, hey, if I have more than 10 jobs in the queue, that's a problem. And then how many consecutive samples do I want to go before generating an alert? So I'll say I want 5 samples, but I want to check every minute, not every 5 minutes. So I'm going to change this to 1 minute, and there we go. So now we've got a really good perf counter that says check every minute. If it's over 10 for 5 consecutive minutes or samples, then generate an alert, and I'll import that in. And again, super flexible. If you already have different monitor performance types that you want to use, you can just create fragments for those. Or I think we'll see the community is going to start contributing more and more of the fragments of different types if one doesn't exist that you already want. Okay. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and deploy this again. So I'm going to come in here and choose deploy from the menu. And let's go ahead and push this updated one out. And what you're going to see is it says, hey, you have file version 3, the server has 1. It's just letting you know. Select is auto-incrementing the management pack as we go. And it's just saying the management pack already has this version. Are you sure you want to override it with this new one? Yes, I totally do. Okay, and then back in here, we did service, we did process, we collected performance for reporting, we monitored an application for performance. So let's go and let's look for events. That's a real common one, an alert generating event rule. So again, I'm going to choose import fragment. And I'm going to browse, and I'm going to find a rule, alert generating event log. So that looks like exactly what I would want to use for a simple event log rule. I'm going to choose that. And again, it remembers some stuff that I had previously. I'm going to go ahead and wipe this out just so you can see all the info that we have to provide. But it's going to pre-populate my company ID, my app name, and my target class. So that makes life easy. So my event ID, I'm just going to choose event ID 101. The event source is my print app, just a made-up event source. And the log name, we'll just choose application. Well, let's say we don't know the log name. One of the things that they provided is a browser. So I can look, if it's got some fancy custom event log, I can browse to it. I can find the ops log, whatever, and it'll make sure I don't have any typing or spelling mistakes. So I'm just going to choose application log. And what we can see is it filled all that in throughout the XML. And I'm just going to choose import. So that was a rule. So let me kind of show, maybe I have 20 rules that I have to write. Import fragment, and I want an alert on a 102. Import. And again, I want an alert on a 103 event. Import. And what you can see is really quickly, it's generating all these rules that are for different event IDs. So just by making tiny little changes, I can create a ton of XML in this management pack. So I'll go ahead and save that. And so that shows, an alert generating event log rule, but anything that I have a fragment for, I can choose. So if I was just looking, I've got one for the event log, I've got a repeated event log, I could do SNMP traps, I can do a text log. So you're only limited by the fragments that are available to you. The most common ones that I use on a regular basis, I've created here. But if this is kind of getting the gears turning and you're thinking, oh man, I do this or that, or I've got some custom thing, turn it into a fragment and then you can reuse that one over and over again really fast. Okay, so we did that. Oh, let's talk about views and groups. These are really powerful. So I need to expose, so I've written a management pack. I'm discovering the app, I'm monitoring the app, I'm monitoring perf, and I'm doing events. But now I want to expose this to my customer. I want to let him see this in the console. So you can do that with Fragment. So I'm going to choose Import Fragment, and I'm going to browse. And I have a folder, state, alert, perf, views fragment. So this one basically creates a folder, and it gives you a state view, an alert view, and a perf view for the management pack. We could have different fragments. This is just one example. I could have one that just has alert views or just has state views. You know, I could bring these in as separate things, but this is a real common thing that I provide for all my custom management packs. So I just kind of use this as an example. So let's pick that one. And look at that. I have to provide nothing. It automatically populated all the data that I really need for these views. So I'm going to choose import, and I'm done. I'm going to save it, and let's go ahead and deploy it into SCOM. And I'll deploy and wait for it to come back and tell me that it's all done and happy. And we're done, successfully deployed my print app. And so if I come into SCOM, I can see, yep, sure enough, there it is. There's my Fab print app, version 5. And if I go into monitoring, I'll see that I actually now have a view. And so this was that thing that I just imported, the folder, any alerts. So I've already got alerts on this. That's funny. Somebody's not running. If I look at the state view, I can see here's everyone that I've discovered already that's running the print spooler service in this environment. So here's all the instances that are running my application that I'm monitoring. One of them's already showing up critical. If I look at a performance view, it's too soon. It takes about 10 minutes before perf data shows up. So our perf collection rule would start showing up here soon, and I'd have performance data. And then here's my first alert that the service, foo. This was the foo service that I made up. So it's, of course, alarming that it's not running on a server. That's funny. Okay, so that's folders, views. You know, you can bring those in as fragments as well. And then the last thing was groups. So groups are really powerful for overrides and scoping notifications or scoping console views. And so it's really powerful to create a group that contains my application. But that's actually really hard to write in the console. In fact, it's not possible. If you go to write in the console, you're only allowed to create a group of Windows computers based on properties of those computers. And whether it has this application is not a property. So there are tons of examples of how to make these complex groups that contain like the computers or the health service watchers, but you have to edit the XML directly each and every time you create that group. Well, with Fragments, that's not the case. And I want to show you several different groups that we can create, different types. So I'm going to choose Import Fragment, and I'm going to browse. And I've got these different groups that I have already predefined. So one is like group class instances. So this would be a group of my application class. That's powerful if I want to scope notifications for people to only get alerts on the app itself and not anything else. But I also have groups of Windows computers that contain the application. And then I have groups of Windows computers and the health service watchers. So for people that have been supporting SCOM for a long time, that's a very common thing that we have to provide for application owners. So we need the health service watchers in their group so they will see and receive notifications for heartbeat failures and server down. Without that, they can't. So these are very complex groups to write, and with Fragments, they're really easy. So let's start with just a simple group of the application instances themselves. I'm going to choose that, and again, I have to provide no data. It automatically pre-populated the only 3 things that it needs. So I can import that. And again, it's missing a reference for the instance group library. So Silac will automatically just go ahead and import that for me. And let's do this again. I'm going to choose Import Fragment. And then I'm going to browse. and go to my groups. And this time I'm going to choose a group of Windows computers. So this isn't just Windows computers based on some criteria. This is Windows computers that contain my class. So it's really powerful, and I'll show that in the UI here in a bit. So I'm going to choose that, and once again, I have to provide nothing. So it's incredibly fast. So I'm going to choose import. And if I go look at classes, if you wanted to see these, you'll see these instances, these groups kind of showing up. So here's my instances group, and here's my computers group. So I'm going to import Fragment, browse, and let's go ahead and do the Windows computers and the health service watchers. Again, something really complicated to create, but look what I have to provide, nothing. So I literally just choose that fragment and hit import, and I'm done. And that's going to show up here in this list. So here's my computers and watchers group. So let's save that and deploy it. And it says, hey, you know, you've got version 6, version 5 is on the server. Yep, let's go ahead and do that. And it says, yep, I've successfully deployed that. You're ready to go. So let's go look in SCOM at what we have. So again, here's my print app. I've got the alert view, the performance view. Let's see if we got performance. Hey, there's our performance data. So I can start, you know, we're collecting that jobs underscore total in the print queue for each one of these. I can, you know, grab some and say show and choose the time frame of the last 10 minutes, and that's only collecting every 5 minutes, so I don't have enough data points to show in the chart, but it just shows it was very easy and it just works out of the box. So the last thing that we created was groups, so let's go look at some of those. So I'm going to go into authoring and choose groups. And this was, let's see, I'll use my company ID Fab. And there's the 3 groups that we created, the instances, the computers and health service watchers. So I can right-click this and view group members, and let's see if it worked. Okay, so I just imported it. We're still actually waiting for group population to run. So let's try view group members of the computers group. There we go. So this one's working. So here's a group of all the Windows computers that contain my application. So that's really powerful because now I can scope views and I can let people see notifications about everything going on their servers since Windows Computer contains that. Let's look at the computer and health service watchers, view group members. So we don't have our watchers yet. We're just waiting on group population to fill that in. So that'll be coming quickly. This is just a timing thing, view group members. Yeah, so there's my instances. This is now populated. Let's try one more. We're still waiting on that. Okay, so that'll come in just a minute. And then we would see the health service watchers as well within that group. So pretty cool. You can see how fast this is. I just scratched the surface on the fragments that were available. We definitely completed our task list, though, for Fabricam and our goals. We discovered the app. We discovered, we started monitoring services. We started monitoring processes. We collected data for reporting. We created a monitor for threshold of performance. We did 3 event rules. We created 3 views in the folder, and we did 3 groups, all within about 40 minutes, and that was going really, really slow. I think once you got comfortable with this, we could have done that whole thing in 5 or maybe 10 minutes at the most. And you can see that a whole bunch of what we did, we didn't even have to provide any data because it pre-populated that using the MP Author console whenever I go to import a fragment. And so there's a ton more fragments available for different scenarios. We went through the most common ones, but I'm constantly adding to this library as well. And the community, we really want to see the community start to add more too. So I'm getting lots of comments, and people are sending me example fragments that, you know, I'll include in mine, or the community can kind of share on their own as well. So the more fragments we have, the easier this is going to get, the more powerful it's going to be, and the more complex and in-depth management packs we'll be able to create without really having to know a line of XML. So pretty neat. I'm very excited about, fragments in general, but also, the way Silex taken this tool and made it just so simple to use. So, so lastly, I just want to show some resources, where to go get Silex MP Author Pro. Then my fragment library is on TechNet Gallery today. You can go download that. It's just a zip file with all the little fragments that I've created. It's version 1.8, so I've updated it 8 times since my initial deployment of it, based on customer feedback or based on, every time that I write something new, I'll go add that. So I'll continue to update that. And if you guys have ideas about things that are missing from that you think are very useful or things you would use, please let me know, and I'm happy to develop something like that. A link to the Visual Studio authoring extension. So if you are a developer and you're familiar with Visual Studio or you prefer that platform, you can go download VSAE and bring that in. And then I've got a step-by-step blog series on using VSAE. So everything I demoed to you today using MP Author, I've done that exact same thing in a step-by-step blog series for Visual Studio. So if you think this was cool, you want to play with Visual Studio and kind of look at the differences between the two, definitely step out and do that.